The Wither Stakes is the second in Aqueduct's Derby Prep Series, or technically the third if you count the Remsen. This is running a mile and an eighth, and it's for 3-year-olds, and it's the ninth race on Saturday's card. And it does bring up something that we notice every year, is that the distances for Aqueduct's Derby Prep Series are very inconsistent or incongruent, I guess you could say. This is a mile and an eighth, and we'll go back to the Gotham at a mile, and then we'll go to the Wood Memorial at a mile and an eighth, and you got the Count Fleet mixed in there somewhere at a mile and a 16th. So there, you don't see that progression in distance that helps you gauge how good these 3-year-olds are. What a horse who is mediocre in the Withers at mile and an eighth now in April might be very good at it. So just kind of a little rant on my part that I think NYRA really needs to think about the distances in these races and try to make them a little more uniform for the bettors. But that would be an anomaly doing something for us, wouldn't it? Okay, enough of that. On to the field. This is not the greatest of fields. There isn't a lot of star power in it. We do have a couple of faces we've seen before. El Grande O ran in the Jerome and was prominent at Saratoga, trained by Linda Rice. Lightline is a Brad Cox trainee, so that obviously makes you pay attention. And we've got a couple of Pletchers, a Speed Runner and Canate, and then the Bob Baffert defection to Brittany Russell, Mission Beach. So there are some interesting horses in here, none that are really terribly prominent or have not been. So it does make for an interesting betting race, if nothing else. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a great quality field to be a good betting race. So this is maybe an instance of that. So if we take a look at how we're going to play this, we'll go through these one at a time as we always do. And number one, Speed Runner certainly has the pedigree for 2 turns. And he did score at the distance last time, which is more than most of these can say, that he's already running a mile and an eighth. It was a very grinding win, where you had to show some grit dealing with the front runner to get past in the stretch, and you certainly have to like that. The question, of course, was the quality of the field, and it is just breaking a maiden and stepping up. Not sure it's a huge step up in class in this race, but it is a step up, and I don't know that I saw a whole lot there to say that this is a rapidly improving 3-year-old. So the fact that this is a Todd Pletcher, and also the fact that he was a little late changing leads in the stretch, tells me there's maybe some work to be done, a little more chiseling on the marble. So I'm going to let Speed Runner beat me in this race. I'm going to try to find value elsewhere. El Grande O has been keeping some good company, including the Champagne Stakes, amongst other races. Ran at Saratoga, and this one had the best race this one had was in the mud around 1 turn versus Statebreds in the Sleepy Hollow. So it is a little questionable, but, you know, keeping good company should hold this one in good stead. I don't see any real speed balls that are going to make things difficult for El Grande O. And the fact that this one has been running at higher class levels and has acquitted himself pretty well, I think makes a very positive win candidate. Of course, the distance is a little bit of a question, but I think this one has the pedigree to handle it. And it'll just be a question if they can catch El Grande O. But I think he looks pretty good here. And maybe Linda Rice can get her first Derby Prep victory. I don't believe she's won any others. So El Grande O, I think, is one that we should use, being what likely will be the lone speed. Looking at Deposition, he's another bred for the distance, but this one has struggled in an ungraded at Laurel last out, and he swung 6 wide before flattening out after a mid-pack trip, and it was only at 7 furlongs. And he does have the look of one where the longer it, the better, but the top end is certainly wanting. One thing positive you can say about Deposition is I think he'll keep running. So if you want to throw him underneath at a price, I think you certainly can. But he has kind of a plodding style, and I don't see that as being necessarily effective in this field anyway, and it is a step up in class. So deposition, if you like them, use them underneath, but I'll pass at this time. Late line is pretty obvious, pretty logical. Brad Cox trainee. He broke slow in the last optional claimer at Oaklawn, and that was kind of unusual as he'd been on the engine in his prior 2 races, and I don't know that it was necessarily an effort to teach him how to raid or come from behind. He just broke slowly. So that's a little bit of a concern. Certainly in a mile and an eighth, he'll have time to recover from it, and he did so to get up for second in his last race, sweeping out 5 wide with interest. And it was a really nice effort against Carbone, no less. The career high number off the bench that the 3-year-old debut is certainly a positive. The one knock I'm going to have with Lightline is Brad Cox horses who debut at Indiana Grand tend to be more on the JV variety. And that's kind of where I have a little bit of concern. Now, we also know that Hit Show was on the New York circuit last year, and it wasn't the greatest. And so I think that maybe he brings Lightline here as a horse who could pick up some easy wins and maybe needs is a bit of a project, and maybe that last race was an indication of that. Still, I think the talent is there. A move forward is very logical, and you'd have to like Lightline, particularly if he breaks better, which he probably will, because his last 2 races he was fine. So should be able to get right off of El Grande O, and then it'll be a question of whether he's good enough, and I think he's a logical win candidate in this spot. Seminole Chief pulled off the upset in the reality stakes, beating Ben Tornado. It was at 12-1, but obviously Ben Tornado is back at 7 furlongs for the Swale, and that's probably where he's most comfortable. So I don't know how much we can give him a whole lot of credit for that. He did stay on the pace early, meaning Seminole Chief, and he did have enough late to get up, but his last fraction was extremely slow. And being by Gervin, who doesn't get 2-turn horses, probably doesn't want the added ground. So Seminole Chief, and because he beat Ben Tornado, might be a bit of an underlay. So I'm going to toss him. I don't think he's qualified for this race. Which brings us to Mission Beach, and I think this one is extremely interesting for a couple reasons. He flamed out in 2 stakes races at 2. He had blistering fractions he was chasing in the Hopeful and the Bob Hope for that matter. But in his last out in an optional claimer at Laurel, they changed tactics with him, and he rated off what were pretty pedestrian fractions to get up. So it was kind of a mixed result. I mean, the major positive is that he has learned how to manage his speed and rate better, not having to be quite so keen on the front end. So because we saw some quick early fractions from him early in his career, you know the speed's there. So if he can stretch it out a little bit more, then I think he's definitely a factor in this race. And he certainly has the pedigree for 2 turns. We're not going to worry about that. The question is, if that last race, did he need the fractions to be quite that soft to get up against, a optional claimer field at Maryland isn't a graded stakes race, around 2 turns no less. But I think they used it as a springboard and a learning experience. And if he looks like Mission Beach learned his lesson, so I think he's a logical contender in here. If Lightline breaks slowly again or has any type of problems, then Mission Beach looks pretty good to me, and I think you'll get a decent price from him. Then we look at Kanate, and this one's given the struggles at higher classes. Maybe it speaks to the weakness of the Jerome that he finished 3rd, albeit a distant one. The pedigree doesn't scream 2 turns, being by social inclusion, and the lone effort at 2 turns. He weakened late, albeit against a decent field, but I just think it shows a kind of a reluctance for him to want to get longer distances. There's a little bit to like. I mean, he did have that impressive maiden win, but the fact is, when they've gone up in class, he hasn't responded, and that to me makes him a bit of a project for Todd Pletcher, so maybe he can rebound here, but I don't see it, and I'm not willing to take a short price to find out, so I'll pass on Kanate. Then we've got our later runners. Uncle Heavy we'll talk about first. I had a grinding effort last time in the wait for it at Parks, and he ran down a tiring leader. The thing about that race is the fractions were extremely slow, and the final time for a mile 70 was, I think, 1:49, which is incredibly slow. So I think it's a tall order for a one-pace kind of horse who just won a grinding effort at an extremely slow time to come back here and beat horses who are going to have the advantage of being on the front end, where the pace probably won't be terribly lively and are a little classier. However, Uncle Heavy has that grinding style. I think he's just going to keep running, and because he will, he has the possibility of getting underneath. And you've got three horses: Deposition, Uncle Heavy, and Society Man, all want to do the same thing. Just grind slowly along. Even Speed Runner you can throw in there. So take your pick out of one of them to finish that you like best, to finish under one or two of them. But I don't see where he's got the top end to run down any of the horses who are going to be tactically in a better position, being earlier on the lead. And then finally, we'll talk about Society Man. He has the late running style. To me, is the only appeal. You have to note he cost $85,000, yet the stud fee was $125. So that doesn't speak terribly well of him. You can say that about a couple others in here as well. However, he is a lone closer. He's going to keep running, and he'll likely be the biggest price out of any of the later runners, and that's why we're going to include him. So in sum, I think El Grande O to me is very interesting, being what will likely be the lone speed, but I think it's Light Line's race to lose. But I like Mission Beach to be a serious contender in here as well. So let's take a look at our wagering strategy. So if we look at how we're going to play this, the horses that we're primarily going to use are the 4, El Grande O being on the lead. I think he's got a good chance to wire this field. He's going to need a little bit of help, but it is very possible. Light Line, the Brad Cox trainee, number 3, and Mission Beach, number 7, trained by Brittany Russell. And I think those are the 3 primary win candidates, Light Line being the most prominent of the 3. The value, I think, will likely come from Mission Beach in the betting as the 3rd choice. So I think a win-play show across Mission Beach with, odds of, let's say, like 4-1 or better, then perhaps we can get, if we can get anything better than that, then I think that's a bet to make. If not, then, I'll leave it up to you. I probably wouldn't touch him. But those are the 3, and we're going to key Light Line in an exacta box, 3, 4, 7, and then we're going to box liberally 3, 4, and 7. So if we do get the 3 on top, we double up with one of those 2 underneath. Hopefully it'll be the one with the better price. And then we'll key a trifecta with the 3, with 4, 7. Then we'll go 3, 4, 7 with 1, 2, 6, and 8. We're just going to use Speed Runner, Deposition, Society Man, and Uncle Heavy. I get pretty certain one of those 3 is going to end up 3rd. And we'll hopefully get the one with the best price. And then we'll back it up with a saver with 4, 7 on top with 3, with 1, 2, 6, 8. This is, it seems there is some value, but most of it's going to be coming from underneath, I think. And that's the issue. Hopefully having those Pletchers in there will fatten up the odds on some of the others. But I don't know how much we can get for a price to take this one down. Maybe El Grande O or Mission Beach. We'll hope for one of those 2, and if it works within our betting strategy, then we'll get max out our ROI. But Light Line's race to lose, and what you'd have to say is kind of a mediocre version of the Withers.